Hello everyone, how are you doing today? Hope you're doing well. So in this video, I just wanted to quickly talk about modern dating and I think some of the misconceptions that people have about what's going on. Or not necessarily the misconceptions, but just kind of address the state of modern dating. And I'm going to explain why I don't think it's quite as dire as many people make it out to be. So to start with, yes, things objectively speaking, and even subjectively from many people's perspective, modern dating is very broken. People are fragmented, dating apps are filtering people in bad ways. People aren't meeting face to face. Both men and women are kind of losing trust in each other and their intentions. And overall, people are just a lot more lonely. Birth rates are declining, marriage rates are declining, divorce rates are going up. All that is fundamentally true. All of that data that we're seeing, all of these social trends and cultural trends, they're all 100% true. But that is not reason to give up on dating or just men and women in general. So here's the thing. Human nature is very stagnant throughout pretty much all of history. It's a complete constant. We all have the same fundamental drives and desires during pretty much any time period in human history. You look at any civilization, people are fundamentally doing the same things. There's ambition, there's greed, there's building, there's protecting, there's feeding families. All these things are found throughout all of history. They're a complete constant. And one of the constants is the idea of pair bonding. Human beings are inherently pair bonding creatures, which means we look for people, both romantic and non romantic, to have a relationship with. So when it comes to romantic relationships, this part of human nature is still true, no matter what environment you put human beings into. Culture can influence human behavior, but it can't override human nature. Human nature will always win out in the end. So when we talk about humans pair bonding and romantic relationships, that's always going to be a constant. People are always going to want to find their somebody. People are always going to want to find love and connection, and to pair bond with someone else. A lot of people say that human beings are not inherently monogamous, but that's false. Human beings are monogamous creatures. We pair bond. Some rites of marriage and bonding have been found in pretty much all cultures. So if you're someone who is kind of losing faith in modern dating, I want you to remember that human nature is pretty much immutable. It's constant throughout all of history, and that includes our instinct to pair bond with another human. So when you look at modern dating, or just sexual norms in general, or just the current state of men and women, where they're in a culture war and there's OnlyFans and dating apps and all this garbage, right? We have to understand is a lot of that is a very vocal minority. Not everyone is doing this, and social media algorithms are really good at manipulating the perspective. So that might be less than 1% of women doing bad things on dating apps and OnlyFans. But algorithms will boost that to the point that it appears as if that's what they're all doing when it's not really true. It's kind of just perspective. So try to separate our understanding of what we are as human beings from what the perspective that you see in either the news or on social media. Now, human beings do have desires. People have always cheated. People have always been promiscuous. That's not new in terms of modern culture. That's something human beings have always done. However, we are kind of heading to this point where it's being normalized. But again, like I said, human nature is not something you could, just right away with culture. It's something that needs to always be channeled because you can't ignore it forever. It will eventually reemerge in some way. If the culture doesn't align with human nature, the culture will eventually shift or eventually be abolished. So things right now seem really complicated and confusing between men and women, but we've always pair bonded throughout history, and that is not going to change. So the thing you need to remember is that if you're looking at all this, you need to not become part of the problem. You need to find a way to break against this culture, this idea that things are just doomed. People are going to be promiscuous no matter what. That polygamy is replacing monogamy, and you have to look at this culture, recognize it, but then decide that you're not going to be a part of the problem. You're not going to ghost people. You're not going to watch porn. You're not going to participate in the general hedonism and degeneracy of the dating pool. You got to reject this idea that dating is just a market, that people are just comparing um, objects as if they're at a market. You need to understand that love is something that is not fully material. It's something that sort of transcends the material world. It's not purely just a biological process. It's something that really does kind of escape our reasoning in some ways. Because we as human beings, we do things that are quite irrational when it comes to love. Oftentimes, we will sacrifice our well-being, our status, sometimes our lives for someone we love. We will purposely date people who are objectively less good looking or of lower status. We as human beings, we're constantly sabotaging our, I guess you could call it, what the market theorists would call our sexual market value. We're constantly always sabotaging and giving these things up for people we love. I mean, if you just examine the people that you found attractive, not all of them are going to be, objectively speaking, attractive in terms of market logic. But that attraction is still true. It's still something that you're genuinely drawn to. So when you examine your own life, when you examine human nature, and when you just objectively look at what's going on in the dating pool, it's clear that this idea of a sexual marketplace is not fully true. It may be a very crude approximation in some cases, but for by and large, it's just a bullshit theory that you need to just reject. You need to not be a part of the problem by believing that. And there's a lot of incentives out there that people have for pushing this idea because it's profitable. You don't need to actually go into the nuance of human nature and human romance in order to take advantage of the marketplace logic. You can just put it into an algorithm or sell a product really easily. The marketplace model is very profitable, which is why it's pushed so hard. But it's not true. It's not how human beings actually meet. So I hope this gave you one little piece of hope for the dating market, or the dating pool, I should say, is that it's not as dire as you think it is. People will always want monogamy. People will always want to pair bond. Romance is not dead. Reject polygamy and just stay hopeful about finding someone in the future. Bye. All right. Thanks for watching.